shared with the group about the process that the Planning Commission went through before and how the Planning Commission's decision was based on some analysis of existing built structures. So, yes, ma'am.
I wasn't sure if you were done, but I just wanted to add that as part of that group discussion, I thought it was really interesting that several of the council members talked about properties that are on Dandridge and really used that as an example of properties that are all three units in a row that look like they're built out to the maximum extent possible, and how crowded they looked. Mm-hmm. And so the point that was being raised by folks in that group was that an increase in the FAR for a 5,000 square foot lot is different than for a 6,000 or 7,000 foot square lot. So you can't apply necessarily a fraction increase in the FAR does not equate evenly to the smaller lots.
Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am. And so the fourth group that discussed at the council meeting,
Mr. Howard.
It's just something that's keeps getting kind of fallen by the wayside, is that our floor area ratio definition and what we've been codified is anomalous compared to surrounding municipalities and even industry terms, especially as it's applied to residential structures, and that we apply the attached garage differently than most other municipalities do. And so that was one of the things that it tends to be a sticking point in all of these conversations. It keeps coming back to this garage. And so I want everybody to be aware that the way that we define the floor area ratio in our code is different than pretty much everybody else. It's non-standard, it's asymmetric. And so there's definitely an opportunity for looking elsewhere in surrounding municipalities to get some good approximation of how it's handled other places. And specifically, some of the surrounding counties and communities actually do not mention it at all in a residential context. So that's one of the other points that keeps coming about. So we'll contextually looking at not necessarily just, oh my gosh, they're filling it up and what are the impacts on infrastructure, but also how does that affect the livability of the structure and the house and affect the community on an individual basis with that inclusion or exclusion of the garage kind of being that focal point.
And I wanted to add to that too, is that for King George and Northumberland, I think the density issues are very different than they are here. So those kind of considerations also need to be balanced out.
Yes, thank you. So group 4 was the group to discuss the capital improvement plan, and as you all noted, Planning Commissioner Ms. Kurtz was the lead for this team, and Mr. Thompson was also had a comment at the council meeting relative to that, where he spoke about how one improvement that the town could make to the CIP process and plan is similar to how the city of Fredericksburg's CIP has a good narrative with each item that gives an explanation, so you know what you're talking about, a little summary. And so I think that was well received as well. So the Planning Commission, the group talked about the fact that this fiscal year budget, the Planning Commission didn't feel like they received feedback from council, so they were unsure what to address when the item was referred back to the Planning Commission. And and that there was a need to ensure that the CIP process includes direct comments, that everyone should be clear that the CIP is aspirational and it's a placeholder for future projects. I think there was some comments at the most recent council meeting that there were some comments brought back, or there was some comments back from the council that was sought, I guess, Mr. Williams, and that, there wasn't a lot to bring back to the planning commission to offer at that point. And I think that's why the commission had said, well, we really weren't sure, that the planning commission staff, asked to update the 2024 report to clear up and, make sure that there was a process going forward to ensure that there was a feedback loop, and that council, verified that they felt like this was following the joint meeting, that council verified that the number of updates was really what they were looking for. There were no other comments overall at the last council meeting after the joint work session when we discussed what happened. And it's my understanding that council directed staff at that meeting, and as Mr. Williams had expressed to you all earlier, staff's going to update the numbers, make sure that the math works, and then that's coming back to council, and then council intends to take action on or receive the report for 2024, with the idea of the planning commission now being freed up to move forward in preparation for next budget cycle. And so that there was some discussion about clarity relative to priorities in the plan and within a 4 to 5 year period, and this idea about the narrative item would help to assist in understanding how that is. And that was all I had.
There was a couple of items for 2024 that needed to be moved over to 2025.
I'm not aware of
Oh,
that.
okay.
No, ma'am. I'm not aware of that discussion. I think,
Yeah, so I just want to add, so really that feedback loop is really important. So, I think, it would be good. So I understand at this point, like, we are not really in part of this process because it's gone back to town council and you guys are having your public hearing. But it would be nice just to get a copy of what we ultimately sent back to them.
Oh, yeah.
yes, ma'am. And Ms. Kurtz, I agree with you. And I will say to you, I think that, and I think Mr. Howard would agree as well, is that in moving forward for this budget year, is to try to ensure that we get the CIP discussion on the planning commission's agenda early, so that, if there is a need, for, sending something to the council and having time to receive feedback, that there, that process, that budget time is a crunch in getting everything prepared. So I think if we shoot for, at the commission level, begin to have some good discussion, January, February, be trying to get something to the board and council for their consideration, as early as possible, March.
Yeah.
April, I would say that's pushing it.
I agree. I think that the more timely and the process that we've outlined in our comp plan to do that is really helpful. And I did want to say that I know that there's been a disruption with Mr. Julie being out, but we had that written as a request, to get that moving forward back in February. And I realize things happen,
Yes,
but
ma'am.
this time we're on top of it. And
We are going
Yeah.
to move forward with getting that information going. And I'll work with Mr. Howell to make sure what he needs, we can try to help get perfect to bring to you all. And that's all I had on that.
All right, and any other discussion items or things that you want to say? All right, with that, then we'll just go ahead and move on to new business, and that is the update to the Planning Commission work plan.
Yes, Madam Chair, I did provided you this summary, rather than giving you the full-blown 11 by 17 sheets, because I'll be honest with you, I think that those are a little bit cumbersome and need a little bit of cleaning up to make sure that they're clear, clearly, they're better able to be read and followed.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna work on that a little bit.
I very much like this format better.
And I think that this
Yeah.
format is a good format. What I would say to this format is perhaps there does need to be a column or two with it that would be an update,
Mhm.
right? to where it is in the process, especially once the commission starts, working on. And if there's some anticipated dates and some of those kinds of things, so that this will turn into a format, like and maybe 11 by 17 sheet, but one that is simpler and clearer to follow and read.
I wasn't sure, but at one of our previous meetings, the last one that we had, when we talked about the work plan, a couple of the members here on the commission talked about how there are too many items on here, and we needed to reduce the number. And I remember talking about maybe 4 or 5 items on the work plan as a more realistic plan, because clearly, half of these items or more have been pushed down. And, so I think that we have 10 on here. I would really like to see 5. And I know other members expressed that, a smaller number would be more efficient. So I did want to share that.
Yes, ma'am. I've offered this to you and appreciate that. I've offered this so that we can look at it. This still shows on here being your 24-25 work plan, because that's where we still are right now. And recognizing that, we go ahead and get started on some of these items or continue working on some of these items as we move into 25, 26. We can, still update this, but I just left it right now as it is draft updates or proposed updates to your 24-25 plan. The first item is an item, and you'll see that 1, 2, 5 are items that are added here because of the joint work session.
Right.
And some clarity,
Yeah.
Between the two groups and where are we going with that. So
I would move to update the work plan with the items as provided.
Second.
all right, wonderful.
Discussion? I would like to have a discussion, and I would like to discuss the possibility of looking at our work plan in relation to some of the things that we've identified are needed. And that is, one is the comprehensive plan update, and that's not reflected in the work plan. And I don't know if that's still something that we're driving towards and that isn't wanted or needed. But if it is, then we should have that in our work plan.
I know that 2025 is the 5-year time period
Mhm.
where, the state code says that the planning commission should review.
Should, or may.
Oh, I thought it was 25, 26. Oh.
We ready for Mr. My recollection is Mr. Dooley brought it up as
Yeah.
had to be addressed on the 5th year, that you didn't have to really do anything at that time. So he mentioned and brought it up. There's no money budgeted to do anything. So
Okay, and, I realize that our current plan needs some updates, because a lot has happened since 2020, with COVID and all. But yeah, so if we don't need to put it on the work plan, then that's good to
It's
know.
fine, and I'll double check, but it was my understanding that 2025 was the year that we should begin. Well, let me rephrase that. It's every 5 years, you're required to review. So
Right.
maybe we were having different interpretations,
Okay.
in my
Yeah.
opinion. than that. I was just seeing what the date that was adopted.
Yes, 21.
21,
yes.
so in my opinion, September 21. But anyway,
So
so
we
in-
recall vividly.
I think it might be a little bit just of a different interpretation of Mr. Dooley and myself.
Yeah.
To me,
Okay.
that means that when you're in that 5th year, you should review it.
Yeah.
And so that would be a determination of, okay, we're in the 5th year, we're gonna review it now, and, is that gonna involve,
Yeah.
right? And what can we budget, what can we do, in-house? So I was looking for that and I didn't include it on here, but that being part of the discussion. But in my looking at it would be year 25, 26.
Yeah, well, I think it would be timely,
It would,
Yeah.
it would be time.
Again, looking at the last 4 years and how COVID impacted our community, and the number of building permits that have been issued, in the last 4 years, in the hundreds. And so, things have changed, and so we need to update it at some point, or at least review it, for consideration of that. And I had another point about, including the CIP on the work plan, because as described earlier, we have several, processes to follow, and we can't just put it all in the last 2 months and expect to have something meaningful from that. So if we can include, having that as the work plan, and the various departments come in, and then us having discussion, maybe, our public hearing, and so on. And then lastly was looking at the resiliency plan and the stormwater plan. It identifies an incredible amount of work that needs to go forward. And so I think that review of the plan and identification of key things that the commission can be looking at in terms of how we can plan for resiliency in the work that we do. So I'd like to include the plan, the resiliency plan, as something that we could and should look at and include in our work plan for identification of items that we need to be working on.
In response to that, I would say, I would not disagree that those are important things to look at, but you discussed going from 10 to 5 items, and now we're up to 12.
Well, I would like to eliminate some of these on here, as I said.
Did you? So, and that's fine. So what I would say to you is that we can certainly have that discussion. What I'm looking at is this is 24, 25. So we will go forward with looking at this again in the new year to updating it to 25, 26. So it's a discussion that we can have this evening, or maybe identify, if you will, Madam Chair, what you're thinking. Let the group think about it. And I would suggest that we're not going to accomplish in December items on here necessarily to begin to move off. So if it's okay to identify tonight, anybody's thoughts on this list here, and then as we bring this back for discussion in January, February, then we can finalize it more for the 25, 26 plan, because that's where we'll be going.
The discussion with Berkeley Group and Tetra Tech, will they be here as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I'm not sure. I think I
So
know
that would be
representatives from
next
Berkeley.
month.
That will be next month, but that is still the draft plan. There's no, the council will not have approved the plan. So
Right.
I would suggest to you that would make, setting priorities of who's working on what and in those priorities, that would be premature prior to council's adoption of the plan, because council is definitely going to take into consideration planning commission comments, public comments, the revisions that, the Berkeley Group's working on relative to any comments from DCR. And then once we have a final plan, then I think it would be appropriate to start to, determine priorities and strategies for implementation and those responsibilities. But I do think that is going to be directed by council.
Because the other thing about the resiliency plan that we're gonna be reviewing in December is it should play directly into the CIP that we're putting together for 2025. So it's not really like something we can defer. Whether you put it on here separately or you put it on there, it goes with the CIP because you have input to that. One way or the other, it needs to be.
And that's
I don't
really the
disagree with
direction
that.
it's going in.
Yes. So we can take a look at that. Like I said,
And
I think
don't
that,
forget,
I hope that council will adopt the plan in January.
Don't
So it
forget that-
falls within your time frame of the CIP as well.
the plan itself calls upon other reports that we've been involved in. So it's not really identifying necessarily new things that we know we need to do. And so it's identified in some of the reports that Raft put together, the group
That's
that
right.
was the environmental group that helped us fashion, response to the flooding issues and stormwater management and so on. So it's not like we're gonna figure out new problems, we already know really clearly what they are.
Yes, ma'am.
It's just nice to have it in a report that's up to date, and it includes all of the new concerns about erosion, shoreline erosion and so on, that is really problematic. So
Yes,
I
ma'am.
agree with Pat that we need to have that discussion with them on next month, and then include that in the work plan for sure.
Yes, and I agree, because I do think too that the resiliency plan is intended to inform the comprehensive plan. So as you're looking at the comprehensive plan, making sure that those align, and in many ways they
And
do.
I just want to say that we wrote that section in the comprehensive plan for that very purpose.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
I think now we're in a position to really begin to initiate some of those things that were identified. It's not something that's done overnight, it's going to take time.
Yes, ma'am.
So with that,
That sounds to me like the suggestion is to consider the items on the list, wait until next month when the presentation is made, and then make the decision.
yes, I
Then
agree.
I would officially rescind my motion.
Second.
Okay.
One last item, if I could, discussion on his resending that, with that, do we agree with that?
Yes, my only comment is regarding the ideation behind all of this ordinance review was to be able to, under the lens of residentially and commercially, how do we want the zoning ordinances to look, and what are the key issues, and then matriculate after those kind of issues are identified, how do we need to make these amendments, and what type of amendments we need to make, rather than strictly skipping the kind of visionary / overarching themes that we're trying to implement straight to editing.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
So we're discussing the amendment, right? And so, do we take a vote at parliamentarian? Do we take a vote on that?
You're discussing amendments to your work plan, is that? what-
Yes.
But what proposed amendment?
Well,
Well, the motion that rescinded.
I
rescinded-
rescinded my motion.
So you rescinded the motion to approve it as presented.
okay,
And so now there's new discussion.
May
okay.
I have, so in the discussion, can I?
We're in
ask a question?
discussion.
Yes.
I hope this is easy, but item 3, has this been on our list in the past?
Item 3 was added at much more recently. It had not been on
And
there
can you
before.
give me a
And-
Reader's Digest? version
Yes, I was gonna
of what
kinda
this
go
is
through
for
those and do
how
that this
I
evening.
came up?
Okay.
My part of item 3, and I'm working on redirecting the variance part of it, is that our variance ordinance is not in sync with the Virginia code. And so I want those to be in sync, so that's why the focus is on that.
Did that
It's not
happen?
that big of a task.
That's what that would be my second question. Is that a major task?
No.
It's,
So
Okay.
3, 8, and 9 all seem to fall under that umbrella, and they're like kind of identified individually and separately.
they're different, but they do fall under, minor revisions, but they're different topics.
Yeah.
Right, so
So
I don't
they
know that I
could
would put
be-
them all under one, but they could be handled
Some.
ideally within
Yeah.
the same kind of timeframe.
Yeah.
And that staff would be doing a lot of that and then bringing it to you, because that's.
So it might be helpful then to combine.
I wouldn't combine them,
Oh, I see.
but I think that you could anticipate that the commission's workload on these items would be less.
But like on 3 and 9, the verbiage is almost exactly the same, variances and appeals and administrative variances.
Mhm.
So that's why that's what caught my eye. And then, of course, non-conforming typically accompanies the variations and appeals because it's non-conforming. So that's conceptually how it came together, so.
Well, let me clarify, that 9 is talking about administrative variances and setting up a procedure for that. That's very different which is just dealing with what you have to do when you consider a variance before you. Administrative variance would be by the zoning commissioner, granting that would not even come to you. So that's a different rewrite than what
Yeah.
I'm undertaking now.
So that would be excluded from 17 as a different article, or it would be incorporated
It-
under 17?
It would be incorporated under 17, but it's a different process.
Yes.
And it's a different discussion that I think it's a different discussion that needs to occur.
Okay.
At the planning commission and council level relative to why would you do this? How would it benefit? And, here are some parameters and then make a final decision if that's something that you would want to change the ordinance to do. Yes, it falls under the same, article as the BZA variances, but I think the concern that, really about Article 17 right now, which is why we separated this from variances and from administrative variances, was because of the cleanup, basically, language that we want to get in there, which is a quicker process.
Yeah, administratively, typically we try to issue iterative revisions just for cleanliness and timeliness.
Yes.
And I don't know if there's an opportunity for staff to combine those things or not, so that we can just make it all 117 and push it through.
I think it would slow down.
It would slow down the process.
Okay, no,
It was.
I understand the resource constraints, and I don't want to unduly burden staff.
I just conceptually trying to parse that.
I
Thank
should
you.
be able to get a variance thing to you next month.
Okay.
Go ahead and do that.
And administrative variances to me is something that we need to talk about, but but prior to doing that, to me, we need to think about some of the, revisions that we've been considering relative to the R districts first, and try to get those ironed out. Because when you go towards the path of administrative variances, they have to be typically, they're very specific, and state law is specific on, where your discretion is in granting administrative variances. But I think we all need to have a better, clearer understanding of some of those articles that define those regulations first, before we start considering regulations that would allow for
I understand the creep of our.
Optional variances.
As the
Optional
standard
variances.
of judgment and looking to avoid that.
Yeah.
Absolutely, 100% agree.
Mhm. Yeah, because administrative variances are optional.
Yes.
And just, as an administrative question, we had talked about the change in the code that allowed audio or remote participation. Does the commission have to take a vote on that, or how would that?
You already have.
Okay,
Voted on that.
okay, so
The
so we'll
policy.
look at the language
Right.
probably
Already
next
approved the
month?
policy.
Okay.
Y'all approve the policy.
Okay, so one of the in the minutes, it said that the commission had a responsibility to do something, and I wasn't sure what was.
Amendment, it was, my recollection is adoption into the bylaws in January.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
is the next action
Right,
item.
Yes.
So
But in the
that's one
interim-
thing on the work plan as well. That's a minor thing and probably doesn't need to be on the work plan, but. Okay, so with that, so we understand that, we'll go, next month after the presentation, by, the Berkeley Group and, possibly Tetra Tech coming in. We'll have new issues to be, discussed as items for our work plan. And at that point, we'll go through and adopt a work plan for 2025. Correct? And with that, we'll go ahead and move to the next item, which is stakeholder input and review processes.
And I don't have a PowerPoint presentation or anything. I wanted to, since the first item on our, or first two items on the work plan, are relative to the FAR and Article 13 parking. One of the agreements I think that came from the Planning Commission and Town Council joint work session was that relative to both of these items, the commission would seek stakeholder input and also, have review that stakeholder input. And so this item is to get you thinking about, and if you're ready to make a decision on this tonight, we can move forward with that. But to get you thinking about and take action on, if you're ready to do that, is how do you want to receive, what is the process that you want to use to receive stakeholder input? Is it going to be, a group of folks that are identified by the commission? Who's going to be involved in it? How then are we going to meet, right? As far as, having a stakeholder input session. And then after that, what will you do to review that input? Will you then have a larger work session where, you discuss the input and allow any other input that may come from the public? So I wanted to bring this to you to talk about process. It is not, we don't have a list of stakeholders prepared. We don't have any sort of processes. We know that, we all know, you all know who you're hearing from. So I wanted to throw that out there for some discussion and see if you all, how you all wanted to direct that. There are some options. One option would be, just from a staff standpoint, there is a building / or builder committee meeting or committee group that staff has met with. It's the local builders, and staff has met with the town. Staff has met with this group on a couple of occasions and talked about, site plan review processes and how we could improve that and some of those kinds of things. So I do know, because I hear from many of them, and I'm sure you do too, that they would be interested, stakeholders, in talking about FAR and also in talking about parking. But we also have the input from the Economic Development Committee. So we could have the building community, somebody representing the Economic Development Committee, but we also need to involve residents, right? It's not only, you don't only want to hear the opinion, not that that's, neither one of them are more important than the other, but we definitely need everyone, the whole round group to provide that input. So, we do have a couple of people that have spoken at some of your meetings relative to FAR. Not really so much parking. So that's one option, building committee, and let's look at who spoke before about this. The other option would be, involving the building community and having each of the commissioners, identify a citizen that you may know of or citizen or two that could also be involved in these, stakeholder session that we would have. And so I wanted to get what your thoughts are. We could even say, well, yes, we know we have this building committee, but instead of involving that whole group, so that they're definitely will want an even number, right? That we could say, okay, each commissioner, you can pick a builder and someone that you think is knowledgeable, whether it's, about real estate in the town or a citizen interested in this topic.
Well, I think that it would be helpful to have a list of the builders, for example.
Mr. Chairman, I'm very sorry, but I have a firm commitment right now, and I have to leave. I only want to say I'm very interested in the FAR, and whatever discussion comes,
I can
would
update
like
you if you
to,
like
see
later
and
on.
have somebody, if that's the way it works out, I'd love to be involved some way in that. And again,
Thank you.
I apologize.
I also have a previous commitment that I need to get to, but my only comment on
Can
that.
we
would-
discuss then? I'm sorry.
My only comment on that would be, I think leaving it to the commissioners to pick a builder and a citizen to come to it, not with zero comment on commissioners themselves, but that process lends itself inherently to bias.
Okay.
I think you already have a builder community that you can contact. You already have a business community that you can contact through the Economic Development Committee. if we can put out some kind of an announcement to the rest of the townsfolk to say, need your input, and either pick a time or place or have them provide input digitally, well, that leaves it open to people who want to participate, and it removes all potential for bias. So that would be my comment on that process. And that being said, I also need to leave, so.
Okay, well, I think that that is good advice, because we don't know the builders, you know, and we don't know who in the community might want to participate. So it would be very difficult for us to manage that without staff.
And so, Madam Chair, and I could offer that how we've done this on other projects and is that we establish a stakeholder input process, staff establishes that, where we would bring in, the building committee, then staff would have another meeting with the local realtors, staff would have a meeting with the members of the Economic Development Committee, and staff would also put out, reach out definitely to the people that we've heard from, right? That are citizens that are interested in the topic, but also offer or reach out to pull citizens in if they're interested in setting up a time when citizens would be involved. And then we could ask questions, walk through, talk to us about this, what your concerns are, what are the benefits? Because, as we look at this, it's important to take a look at this as it relates to, the market and how the town compares with other ordinances.
And as you were saying, the impact on the infrastructure.
The impact on the infrastructure, we want to look at, as we increase the FAR, that's one question that we would talk about with each one of these 4 groups. And then bring all of that back to you all, the reporting from those meetings. But we also want to talk about, how you calculate FAR and how our FAR calculation compares with others and get input from this group on that. We want to talk about impact on, the housing market that we have now, and involving realtors for that would be good. And then we also need to be aware before we make changes on how the variations in the FAR affect the built community. So,
and the other thing that I mentioned is that increasing the FAR for a standard size lot of 5,000 square foot is different than a 7,000 square foot lot. So we need to sort of understand the impact of, can we do that across the board? And if so, what does that look like?
So we've had a high return on effort utilizing the quarterly utility bulletins previously as a way of leveraging staff effort for, like I said, higher level engagement. And then also using any digital newsletters that we've started here in the last few months. So it's just a suggestion that we've used in the past. We've received some good feedback.
So I think another thing is that typically the simplest solution is typically the best. Just an idea that we do all the newsletters, send emails to these private, these builder groups, but maybe in the February, March, give time for people to put it on their schedule. We have a Town of Pelona Beach Planning Commission / community workshop. Right after approval of minutes before public comment, we have a community workshop. Staff gives us an intro. We go out to the seats where all the builders and people interested are. We sit out there and staff gives an intro, and then we just have a kind of community input session for an hour. I feel like instead of doing stakeholder meeting here, bring a person here, talk to a person there, just have it well in advance, mass produce it, call people, email people, tell them this is going to happen. This is your time to really talk to everyone. Set it for February, March Planning Commission meeting. And after that, you still have public comment. Anyone that couldn't make it can email in, but just Planning Commission meeting / community workshop.
And I think that's a great idea. And so that's obviously another option, is doing it all at once.
Yeah, basically.
So my question to you is, how would I want to make sure that we as a combined group understand or know all the comments that are being shared. So would you want it to be as, you go out and, into the group, or it could still be, maybe separated into groups and that kind of thing, but I want to make sure that all of the comments get back to the whole.
Yeah, well,
Commission.
typically, like, we would have some level of facilitation in
Yes.
that, so that it's just not a melee.
Yeah, I guess what I'm just trying to say is I'm trying to save us from doing a community meeting on a Thursday night, some other nights
Yeah.
where we talk about this. Let's just incorporate the community meeting into our
Yeah.
regular meeting.
We can
How
do
it,
that.
how it facilitates, that's up to you
Yeah,
guys.
but we
I
can
have
work on
great
that
confidence.
facilitation, we can work on that facilitation and maybe have some leading questions and then get the group, make sure that we're capturing on the, writing down comments and that kind of thing. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, if that's something
I
that
think
the whole
that
commission
method-
agrees on, I want to make
Good.
sure that's what I said. That's why I wanted your input. How would you like best for this to be organized and feel like you're getting what you need?
Right, I guess from my perspective, the most important thing is we don't just get a builder perspective.
And I think the way that you've styled this, we would hear from everybody in the group.
One of the things that we've done in some times, and this is just, I'm throwing out discussion back, so you let me know, is that if, do you feel comfortable that everyone would be willing to come out and speak openly and share their comments, questions, whatever, if everybody is in a group together? Or do you think we should hear from builders, realtors, citizens? I'm throwing that out. If you're comfortable that everybody will come and be open and share at a public, input session like that, I'm fine with that too.
Well, I just fall back to our joint session and how interesting that was, that we had the groups.
Mhm.
And I have to say that people that participated that were in our group, I think they very much wanted to ask questions. And so in this case, if we followed your idea of doing it as a whole group, it would allow that back and forth. So I think that would be the best way to hear from folks. And I didn't see anyone, I think that there would be a good participation, definitely from the builders and the realtors. So I think getting the community out is something important to do.
A consideration, just for consideration for the commission, or Mr. Thompson's suggestion. If you do a community meeting, it might be better to say, okay, you're gonna have two specific topics, and you break it out into two groups. You have everybody talk about the FAR, you have everybody talk about whatever the second topic is, which I think.
Well, I thought we're going to combine these two together, that
We can do it, we
I hadn't
could
thought of
combine
that.
them.
I was thinking clearly it was one topic at a time,
Right, one
Yeah.
topic at a time, but the two
at
topics.
separate meetings.
I thought he was looking to do it in one meeting.
We can do it however staff wants to do it. It doesn't need to be one or two,
Well, I think you would have a different group.
Yeah,
Right.
it would be very different.
I think it would be a different group on the two, not some of the same players,
Right.
but I think that there are gonna be some different players. So maybe we could do it.
Two separate groups.
Separate.
Yeah.
I really think
Okay.
you're gonna get feedback from all the different perspectives. I mean, yes, are there some people that maybe would not wanna speak up? Yes, but they're not gonna come to the meeting.
I think another aspect we use a lot, and at least when I'm planning community meetings for the city, is we have like different, I don't know how big they are, but like big boards that you put on the little three-legged post with Post-it notes that could go in that kind of back section of after this discussion or before, like, what are your thoughts on this? Here's a Post-it note, fill it out, and that's just a different form of data collection that
Yeah,
it's not someone that has to speak for their
Right.
voice to be heard.
Yeah, that will work very well.
yeah, I think that does collect people's, their attention, and it's visible, so you can, a visual tool to use.
And that offers
Yeah.
the opportunity for those that may not be as comfortable speaking out,
Exactly.
if they think
They
there's
still have a
opposition
sticker.
to what they might say. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
I like
But
that.
I do think that the two meetings should be separate. And, because it's two different groups of people. Builders are going to be, one, and I think that they're going to be very active. And so if we could, and then of course, parking is so essential for everybody. You know, I think separating them, they deserve to have their separate meetings, those topics, in my opinion.
Just my 2 cents. I don't think there's nearly as much interest in parking, even though parking is important. So you may not have to have a whole entire meeting, just like part of your public, you know, planning commission meeting like we normally have with public feedback. Just my 2 cents.
Thank you.
All right. So with that,
If I could add one more thing, I know we're getting towards the end of the end of the calendar year. I guess maybe just to put on staff's thinking brain, if we could maybe put out advertisements for new planning commissioners, if we have some that are rolling off, so that we can hear from them during public comment in December, so that the existing full commission can hear about any potential new member.
and who is going off? I know Mr. Mack.
Mr. Mack is, and I guess there's some, I don't have the list with me, honestly.
Okay, do you know?
So I would be guessing if I said anything, it would be on Mr. Mack, but we will double check. And we did get a new application, or was that, I can't remember that application, that was for BZA or planning commission. I'm not sure, but what I will do is I will, let you all know.
Okay.
I will send out basically this calendar year, you know, what the terms are, or I'll just send out everyone's terms. And then also, if we have any applications, we'll get those together. I think my understanding is that we only had one application that I was aware of.
Yeah, if we
So
have
I'll-
someone rolling off, maybe just another little Facebook or website blast of, we have an upcoming opening, submit your application.
It says on the town's website, Tree Mac, 2025,
Yes,
Chair Luna 27, Nathan Howell 27, Bob Christensen
That's
25,
Oh,
Bailey Thompson 27,
January 25?
Pat Kurtz 25. I don't know when it says 25. November.
Spencer was able to pull it up. It looks like Mr. Christensen is November 2025. Mr. Matt is January 2025. Mr. Hutchins, Ms. Kurtz, 2027, Nathan, 2027, Bailey, 2027, and Vicky, 2027.
So really, it's just Mr. Mack in January?
Now, yes.
So it would be good to get more than one applicant,
Yes.
you know?
We can put that out too.
Yes.
I mean, just say, hey, we need some.
All right.
Thank you.
So any further discussion?
What we're proposing to do, how is that different than a regular meeting with public comments?
Oh, you mean for like this group meeting?
Yeah.
I think the idea is to have it more informal, where we can sit down together as a group. We can hear from folks about what their key issues are. Then at some point, they can identify that on the board. And then at the end of that process, we'll have a good accounting of where people stand. It gives us direction. So that's very different from regular public hearing where, we don't really ask many questions. But this would be more flexible.
It allows a dialogue,
Yeah.
the back and forth dialogue, whereas a public comment period, you really are, respond to the public comments at comment period. Now, in a public hearing, either you're listening to hear that public input, and this would allow in that engagement. It wouldn't be, engagement on necessarily, here's a draft that we want you to talk about, but we're gonna have some points of discussion.
Yeah, and it's informational for us to really listen to what folks are telling us. So that's nice to have.
Yes, sir.
So with that, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion is, meeting is adjourned at 6:44. Well, I tried to get it in within an hour, but I didn't quite make it.
Yeah. Which year that is.
Yeah, this company has to be at least a bid, right? It's under the bid, right?
One thing, we've definitely found is like, you have like a little meeting line and post-it notes, or like, you have a concept and then like, a little